guys, it's Micah from edeneyetarot. I am here today to talk about the full moon in Sagittarius that will be happening on the 14th of June, 2022. And I do believe that's at 7:52 on the 14th. And so I'm here to talk about that. But before we get into that, I had a little thing. I was like, I want to know if you guys can relate. For any of you that are really into fragrance is I'm a Taurus moon, and so fragrance I think is something that I've really gotten into more. I've always really loved aromatherapy and things like that, but fragrance has been something I've really been really getting into over the last year or so, trying to build up my collection and things like that, and really going hard on that. But I purchased a perfume. I think it's an EDP. It might be an EDT, but I think it's an EDT. And I purchased it at Burlington, so it was like $20 or whatever. And when I smelled it, I bought it because it had very unique notes. It was something that I didn't have. I think I bought it because it had frangipani. And frangipani is this very tropical flower. And I didn't have anything in my collection that had frangipani in it. And so that's why I bought it. And the bottle was cute. The box was cute. And so I was like, all right, cool. And so I bought it. I smelled it in the parking lot. It was a blind buy. And I hated it. I'm going to just be completely honest. I absolutely hated it. And I thought about just taking it back another day. But I remember thinking, I was like, this needs to get old. It would be perfect if it weren't so perky. I remember thinking that, and I think it's been a good, maybe it was snowing when I got it outside, so I have to believe that this was in February at the very least. And so it's been a good what, 4 months? And I think it smells the same. But I got the urge to put it on today, and I have it on my wrist. I worked out with it on. And this smells so good. I don't know if it has aged or if this is the same the same smell, and I just needed time to like it. But I remember when I first bought it, I hated it. I was like, no, this is way too bright. It's way too girly. It's way too I am not a big bright very I guess I don't like perfumes that make my nose sting. I like lots of base notes. I like patchouli, and I think I like all of my fragrances that I really enjoy have a lot of base notes of patchouli, a heavy patchouli in there. And then vanillas and things like that. So things that are very dark, even though vanilla I don't count as dark, but this one, it was just very, this is the only way that I can describe that perfume that has the frangipani in it. It's just very up here. And when I purchased it, it was like that, and I just could not stand it. And now I put it on and I'm like, this is perfect. Why didn't I get this before? Why didn't I wear this before? But now it's beautiful. It smelled to me, I think it reminded me of I used to, of course, when I was a kid, I used to go to a Baptist church, and I think it reminded me of the fragrances that the old ladies would have on, because those always made my nose sting. I don't like perfumes like that, but for some reason now, maybe it has gotten old and it's had time to age. I keep it in a closet or whatever. But now it smells great, and it smells like the perfect summer scent. It's not too up here. It's had time to I think, or maybe it hasn't had time, but it's just mellowed out a lot, and it smells tropical and a light floral, which I really like. Anyway, getting off of that tangent, I just had to like share that. I don't know if anybody else has had that experience where you bought, a fragrance and you just hated it, and then for some reason you kept it around, and then like you have the urge to put it on, and you're like, I love this. But yeah, so but yeah, that was a thing that happened this morning, and I was like, this is great. But I think it's so fitting because of like, us being in Gemini season and us like changing our minds about things and going back and forth on things, especially with the full moon in Sagittarius. When we look at the sign of Sagittarius, actually, let me actually like share my screen so you guys can see the actual chart of the full moon. And so when we think about Sagittarius as another double-bodied sign, we are thinking the first thing that comes to mind, for me at least, is going to be healing, striving for something better, something new, and really, I think like searching really comes up a lot when I think about Sagittarius personally, whether it be the like for the reason that Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, and Jupiter has kind of like this dual side to him, where on one side he's like the astute professor that's reading all the philosophy books and all the law books, and just like very very much about learning and teaching, and being that forever learner and searching for something of a higher purpose, and sharing that information with others and sharing that wisdom with others. But then there's this other side of Jupiter that is like, just like Sagittarius is like in the centaur that Sagittarius is kind of like pictured as, that's very hedonistic, and it's kind of like the frat boy jock that you have these two sides of Jupiter where it's just like very astute, and then it's just kind of like the frat boy who's like, yeah, let's drink beer at the keg. And so it's, I think when I think about Sagittarius, that's what I think of, is those two sides. I think, and it's not, and I think I love that because it's not ever going to be put in a box. Sagittarius, much like the square to Neptune that we have during this full moon, it's about not having any boundaries. It's constantly expanding to be able to find the answers for things. So I think with this full moon in Sagittarius, a lot of us might be, first of all, confused because of the square to Neptune on, maybe where we're going, and trying to find like, what purpose does this have? What's the higher plan? What's the bigger perspective? What's the big picture? Sagittarius is so much about the big picture. It's going to be about questioning things, questioning our beliefs around certain areas, depending on where this full moon falls in your chart. You want to check that, because I think that's where we're getting a lot of questions at this time. Sagittarius is also a fire sign, and so it's going to have, not just that intuitive side. Think about how fire is used in mythology. It's like this gift of intuition, or this symbolism of divine connection. And so I do think that this full moon could be a great time to do a lot of inner searching, and like reading and, taking classes to expand your mind, to expand your perspectives on beliefs. I think you'll also, I think a lot of people will find that that they have new people coming into their life to kind of, ask them certain questions that really make them question, like, their own beliefs as well. And there can be some confusion. There is, like, I think with that square to Neptune that this full moon has, it's almost like, I imagine it kind of like as a washing machine, like, like, as being, you have your own like set of beliefs, but imagine like somebody else like throwing in like their own like t-shirt into your washer or whatever, and maybe it's a very vibrant color, and you have like these white clothes or whatever, and it all kind of gets mixed up in your clothes, and it's all just kind of churning and just kind of mixing, and that one can be very messy. It can, I'm sure, cause a lot of confusion. Speaking of which, delays and confusion, I think, can come in like when we're talking about travel. Whenever we're talking about Sagittarius, we're talking about travel, but it can also push us to maybe dive into more spiritual studies as well, and really get creative on like what we're learning. I think because of that square to Neptune, what is beautiful is that there are no boundaries, but it can also really push us, I think, at its better level to kind of cut through what is and is not true. I'm sorry if I don't have the best lighting today. Things are going, kind of, a bit weird. It's sunny outside here in Ohio. However, we have lots of clouds moving through, but it's also hot. So if you can hear the fan going in the background, I do apologize. But I think it's also like cutting through the bullshit when we're talking about this full moon in Sagittarius, because remember that the full moon is where everything is on view. Things are kind of coming to their peak. They're manifesting, and things are able to really be seen. You're able to see like a lot of big emotions as well. Whenever it's a full moon, we're looking at themes of the moon just really doing its thing, like, all the moon things. And so with Sagittarius being ruled by Jupiter, it's expanding on emotions, it's expanding on like wandering as well. The moon can be very much about like, wandering, not having an exact destination. And I think this full moon in Sagittarius is definitely, and that's why I said it's like very much a searcher energy when we have this full moon in particular. And I think that's okay. Not everybody that wanders is lost. I think if you have to wander during the time that this full moon is very active and is, very much, being felt during the next, 2 weeks, then it's all more so about enjoying the journey to being able to cut out what is and is not true. Remember that Sagittarius and Gemini, they're able to really fact check. And I love that the sun is in Gemini, of course, because Gemini is going to question the beliefs, where Jupiter in Sagittarius might really just take it all in. But the nice thing is that the sun is in Gemini, and so it's going to be like, okay, yeah, you can take it all in, but what's actually true? Like, how do we work with this information? How do we ask questions on this information? Is this information actually, is it valid? Does it fit in with, what you're trying to achieve? All those things. And if it doesn't, then, it's not true for you. It can be a lot of, realizing that people have their own truths as well. There can be some issues with like straight up lying with that square to Neptune, or some issues maybe like with getting electronics wet is like something I think of, especially since Mercury will be in Gemini. It won't be in a square to Neptune, but I would watch out for that, like any issues with water and like electronics, or like water and cars and water and movement, rain, if rain damages and things like that, I think about, or like, issues like with cruise ships could even be like a thing. I'm thinking of like transportation, like when it comes to like water with that square to Neptune. It's interesting that I saw recently that there was a video of a cruise ship being on fire, which I also think is interesting because this full moon is ruled by Jupiter in Aries. And so it's about like, where are you going? Not just on like a metaphorical and spiritual, like, path level, but also like, where are you going? Like as far as like, where are you traveling? There can be a lot of chaos, in the mix of trying to find that, higher light, in that higher destination. When you're trying to define goals, because remember that Sagittarius comes right before Capricorn, where we have the goal and we're actively going after and starting the planning and starting the structure. You have to have the chaos before you have the structure. And so I think it's a lot of questioning, how do we create the structure when we're talking about this full moon in Sagittarius as well. There, like I said, can be some, really big issues with big emotions, and people just kind of being a bit dramatic, or, just like, especially like with anger, just, big blow ups can happen, I guess, on, a literal level, but also like emotionally as well. There can be a lot of like feisty emotions. Really pay attention to, like, watch your words. It can be a rough thing when you say things in the heat of the moment and you don't really mean those things, you hurt someone. But I think you can also see in this full moon in Sagittarius, maybe, really seeing the truth of maybe how people feel, which can still be hurtful, but I think it's honest truth, for sure, when we're looking at this full moon in Sagittarius as well. It can be a lot of, finally having the courage, or finally, being willing to invest in yourself for sure, or like, being able to expand network and draw people to you. I think that's the nice part about Jupiter and the sun being in that trine together, is that, you're more adventurous, you're ready to get out there, you're ready to really focus more so on you and your own pursuits, more so than, getting mixed up in like what other people are really trying to do. And Aries is such, I think, like one of the things that isn't talked about a lot of times with Aries energy is that I think it's talked about a lot that it's like selfish, but that's not always a bad thing. But I think it's, with this trine in particular, and there can be a lot of energy kind of just circulating around, being more carefree, being a bit more optimistic about like where you're going in life. Sorry, I just knocked my phone off my desk. Being more optimistic about, like, where you're going in life. And, again, like I keep getting a vision of like a beacon of light, and you're just trying to figure out, it's kind of like following the North Star. When you look up at the sky, and I know I'm using lots of metaphors, so maybe this is like perfect for like, well, full moon in Sagittarius, like lots of metaphors, lots of philosophical metaphors, even though I don't think that these are very philosophical. But like when you look up at a star, and I imagine, I've never followed a star, but I imagine that is a sort of wandering, because you're going towards something that technically it's not leading you in one specific direction. The closer that you get to the star, because the star is up in the sky and you're down on Earth, it is that reaching towards something higher. But you will make a lot of twists and turns because of the different perspectives that you have on that star. I hope that makes sense, but because it's kind of like following the moon too. But I think, we'll get a lot of that when we're looking at the full moon in Sagittarius. And so much of, this full moon is about healing. We can't forget that centaurs, as a pictograph, or like, a picture of Sagittarius is, centaurs were not just like the party animals, which I do think, it'll be a lot of partying and a lot of people getting together and, having all the fun, especially with summer right around the corner. But I think it's also, it could be like a lot of arguing and fighting, possibly violence, as well as like just emotional blowups. But it can also be a time of healing, a time that we just have a lot of downtime where we're needing to heal ourselves, heal our minds, and just kind of rejuvenate, because centaurs were not just the warriors. And I think, especially when we talk about Sagittarius, I've never met a Sagittarius that wasn't loud and proud of being a Sagittarius. And so I always think of like, being willing to stand up for what you believe in particular. And I think that's such a big thing, is like, what do you believe in, is, because Jupiter is the ruler of Sagittarius, but Jupiter is, or Sagittarius is also going to be, so much about taking that time to, dive into like things like astrology, because the centaurs were not just warriors and these party animals and just like super hedonistic, but they were also the astrologers, they were the philosophers, they were the doctors. And so it can be a lot of that, like needing to go to a doctor, needing to like, engage more in holistic healing, wanting to heal yourself, dealing with some sort of like legal issue, or needing to sign papers, needing to travel somewhere. All of that can really come under the full moon in Sagittarius, especially with all the aspects going on during the full moon. And if we think of like the moon in Sagittarius, this is actually going to be the Nine of Wands card in the tarot. And so when you think of the Nine of Wands, you think of recovery. You do think of a bit of anxiety when you think of the Nine of Wands, because it's like the battle is already fought. And now you're just needing time to kind of like block things off, protect yourself so that you can recoup. It is like feeling like, there is like this undertone of feeling like, when is the other shoe going to drop with the Nine of Wands? But it can also be a time where there's great insight, as well as healing that comes with that Nine of Wands, as well as, having time to kind of, put up boundaries and protect yourself, and really have time to really just focus on you and what you need at that time. Because when we have the Sun in Gemini, the Sun in Gemini card is, of course, the Ten of Swords. And I put a blog post out about the Ten of Swords. And it's I think it's kind of perfect because we have recovery, but then in the Ten of Swords we have like the death of something. And when we're talking about Sagittarius in general, we are talking about bringing the archetypes of Capricorn and Scorpio together to create the sign of Sagittarius. And so it can be like needing to cut something off, or needing to create some sort of transition, or, gaining and cutting something off can really be a big part. It's almost like cutting out the cancer of something, or cutting out something that's unnecessary, unneeded, so that you can be a bit lighter and freer to pursue what really is important to you to explore. It's very much like the backpacker energy of the zodiac is, just being willing to be open to the fortune that that can come to you, and being open to the bigger picture rather than on the zooming in on the present. And so much of it can also be about, like with the Ten of Swords in particular, I think that's a lot of what we're getting, because it is the Sun in Gemini card. It can be a lot about like, it's still the transitionary energy, but it can be a lot about like, this thing happened, and it hurt. It was a betrayal. It was, something that I didn't see coming, or it was a fear that I didn't see coming, or that I was running away from. And the beautiful part of that card is that, yes, while something really hurts and something is ended, it's also, or something out of the blue ended, it's also talking about like there is a new beginning that comes after that, because we see in that card the horizon. Often the horizon, we see the sunrise, that is, suggesting a new day or a new beginning as well. And so I think that's all I have for the full moon in Sagittarius. Also, of course, like we see with the full moon in Sagittarius, we can also see not just like the big blow ups and everything. And I would also be careful about with that Jupiter trine to the sun and moon. Getting too high on your own supply, like, or getting too high on yourself can really be a big issue. You can see egos really inflate, at this time. But I think we can, also see a lot of, positive things like, confident people, being more confident as well, to try new things and being more adventurous as well. And so I pulled a major arcana card from my millennial tarot deck that I want to share with you guys. Let me take this down. So I pulled a card from my millennial tarot deck for this full moon. It just is kind of like a collective reading, and then I'll pull like tarot for this as well. So I got the Ghoster, which in this card is the moon. So I think that's really fitting. For the moon, it's about facing your worst fears, and being brave enough to be that warrior for yourself, to face things head on, so that you can move into that more intuitive kind of like higher space. You're able to break down the boundaries that maybe you've built up for yourself. You're finding home in yourself, is always what I really attribute the moon card to. But you have to be willing to walk through like the deathly hollows, or like, the forbidden forest, to be able to do it first. Like in that journey is kind of like, I don't know if anybody's read the Pilgrim's Progress, but that's kind of like what I imagine when I look at the moon. It's not this easy ascent to being king or being the hero. It takes work. And you have to be willing not to want to skate around those hard like obstacles that maybe you have created. But you have to be willing to really face those and be willing to know on the other side of it intuitively, even though you can't see it now, that that there is something to be achieved and something to learn at the end of it all. And that is really what the moon card is talking about. And I just love the picture of this guy. Like, I mean, like, is this not great? Because does this not look like, someone that would ghost someone? Like, but yeah, so that's the moon card. It can also be talking about really leaning into intuition. It can be talking about the full moon in general and things kind of like coming to their peak, and lots of emotions and things like that. It can be about like being a martyr. It can also be a card that's really talking about, needing time for isolation. And, in that process, you might ghost some people. But is that really bad? Like we were talking about with the 9 of Wands, like, do you need time for yourself? Do you need time, peace and quiet to kind of figure things out on your own? And to an extent, I'm almost surprised that we didn't get the Hermit card. But I can see why with the full moon in Sagittarius. Sagittarius really isn't, too much the hermit as it is, just, going off to do its own thing. So we'll see what we have for tarot for the full moon in Gemini. So as I mentioned, the Hermit, we actually have the Hermit. So let's see what else we get. We have the Queen of Wands, the Strength card. Oh, interesting. The Justice card. The 8 of Wands. The 8 of, lots of 8s. And lots of Virgo cards too. Interesting. The 8 of Pentacles. And that's about it. Okay. I lied to you on the Chariot card. Okay. So let's see. So this is a collective message. So we have the moon. So let's start with the Hermit card, since I probably spoke that one up. So if we're being completely honest. So I love that when that happens, when I'm like, oh, I'm surprised I didn't get this card, and it shows up. So the Hermit card is a lot about, like we were talking about, going and finding more self-awareness, not really focusing on what other people are saying or being influenced by other people, but really just tuning into yourself to find self-awareness. This can also be the card that says like a guru is coming, or you are taking the time to really learn, whether you are being your own teacher or somebody is teaching you, or you are becoming the teacher for someone else. It's really about the journey. Again, just like with the moon card, it's saying that you might not always know what the end result is, but the end result is not important. What's important is the journey and what you learn on the journey, more so than anything. Then we have the Queen of Swords, which is the mother of air in this tarot deck. And so when we look at the Queen of Swords, we're looking at someone that does want connection, but she is basically not about to take them shit. She has high expectations for the people that are in her circle. She has been through some things. She knows that life is not just like fairy tales, rainbows, and like unicorns, even though she's fully aware that that can be part of life. And she's accepting of all of that, but she is also someone that is very much grounded in reality, of what life can be, without letting that affect her vision and her goals. And she's very focused on that. It's a lot about truth and honesty as well. that can come with the Queen of Wands and fostering relationships that are based in trust, honesty, and what is true. And I think that's perfect for the full moon in Sagittarius. Next, we have the Strength card, which is Leo's card, and it can be really a card that's talking about authenticity. So things that are not authentic to you, things that don't line up with your own beliefs or thought processes, and also having the courage to question those beliefs, to kind of fortify them can also be a thing as well. And it's okay if, beliefs end up not being fortified, and if they, are proven wrong, that's also okay, because that still takes courage to be able to admit that. And being willing to cut that out and create something new can really come of that as well. This can also be a card that's very creative, and when we're talking about the full moon in Sagittarius, definitely a very creative time. And a time to kind of like birth things. Jupiter is a planet that talks about childbirth and pregnancy too. Especially when it does come to like relationships. When we're talking about like the Queen of Swords, we have the Justice card, which in this deck is called Adjustment, but it is the Justice card, and it's talking about like, what are you putting in? What you put in is what you get out. And so there can't be any like cutting of corners. You have to really take the journey that you need to, but it's also about action. Not just thought as well. It's really about weighing things out, but it's also saying like cause and effect. So what you say is okay, and the boundaries that you set, like those breed certain consequences or results. It can also be about fostering new relationships with people, like we did talk about before. That trine between the sun and or that sorry, not the trine, the sextile. Goodness gracious, the sextile between the sun and Jupiter, and then the trine between Jupiter and the moon is really expanding on relationships as well. And so meeting new people, meeting people that you are very like-minded with, it can help kind of expand that worldview. And some of you can be having some issues with relationships even, that really foster some sort of new growth in you as well. And with that, I love that we have the Chariot card. The Chariot card is really talking about accepting the whole self, not just like the light or the dark, but both. It's complete self-acceptance. And through complete self-acceptance and acknowledgement of your whole self and your own divinity, you are able to really move forward on things. It can also be talking about, some of you might be moving as well, since this is Cancer's card. It can be talking about moving or moving in with someone, maybe traveling to go see a loved one. That can also be a thing, especially since we have the 8 of Wands, which is fast manifestation, something coming in really hot, so really quick, new messages or like new inspiration that you kind of take action on right then and there. I think that's such, such a great way to also look at this full moon in Sagittarius. I expect we'll be seeing a lot of that. People just getting like, this divine inspiration and just really moving on things really quickly, just like we have all Gemini season. But I think, especially with this card coming up, it can be like some sort of inspiration coming up, very abruptly, and having to move on it very quickly. Lastly, finally, we have the 8 of Pentacles, which is talking about it's not enough to, almost chisel away at what is not true. Sorry, like I had to plug in my computer because I forgot it was unplugged. But it's not enough to just, chisel away at what isn't true. And to make the new connections, you also have to put active work into those things. So you can't just like make the new connections and, reconnect, with maybe what you identify with. You have to actively work at those things. You have to continue to foster a relationship with those things, with those beliefs, with those people, because you want those things to last. The 8 of Pentacles is a lot about like looking at the details of things and really working to master something that is that's purposeful, that's fulfilling. And with Virgo or Sun in Virgo, this is the card of Sun in Virgo. It's really looking at almost looking at the future. It's saying, I'm doing this now and I'm making maybe this sacrifice now so that I can have this later. And so I love that it's not just all about like what you're doing right now. Like it's also about the foresight to know this will, you know, come in handy for later. This is going to be beneficial for me later. And so even if it doesn't feel great right now, I'm making the cut so that my future self can be in a better place. It can also have to do with, again, like we were talking about with the Hermit card. It can be about learning something new and learning a new trade, you know, checking up on a health situation or getting test results back, or it can also be about getting creative as well, and using those using new information or education to be able to kind of make a skill something that you're a bit more masterful at, or that you really create more quality at as well. So it's not just all about truth and seeking, it's also about what's the quality of information that you are learning and teaching to other people, because that's a big part of Sagittarius. It's not just about absorbing the information, it's also helping other people by, you know, by teaching it to other people. Sagittarius is like the ascended teacher that lives up on, you know, the top of the mountain and comes down like every millennia, like to like, you know, or not every millennia, but like, you know, maybe like once a month to like to share their wisdom with like the village people. And so with that being said, that is all I have today. You guys, thank you so much for hanging with me through this video. I hope that everyone is having an amazing Gemini season. And I will see you soon. If you would like to book a reading with me, you can go ahead down to the description in the link below. And I will talk to you guys later. Bye.